I once heard my father say to a stranger right in front of me, "What can he even do? Playing with imaginary numbers, thinking he's some kind of genius. Guys like that just want a cushy life handed to them." I stood there, still holding my glass of water like I was some uninvited guest, not his son. But I didn't walk away, I stayed. To hear more and remember more, my name is David Harper, 24 years old. I grew up in a small town called Winston, Georgia, where the sun burns your skin and men are judged by how calloused their hands are. My family owns a traditional wood construction business started by my father, Marshall Harper, back when he was just an unlicensed carpenter. Harper Carpentry was his pride, and to him anything unrelated to wood, hammers, and sweat was just a modern-day scam. Even as a kid, I knew I was different. While other boys dreamed of becoming mechanics, cops, or truck drivers, I was drawn to charts, numbers, and financial models I found in old magazines left behind by an uncle who used to work in banking. I was fascinated by how money moved, not by hand, but by data, by strategy. When I was 16, I used the money I earned washing cars to try out a stock app on my phone. 3 months later, I had doubled my return. I told my father about it. He stared at me and asked, "You're playing with real money? Your own money?" I nodded. "Good. If you earned it, then deal with it if you lose it. Don't expect anyone to bail you out." From that day, there was a quiet line drawn between us. No fights, no arguments, just coldness. Every time I bent over my laptop to study, he'd walk by and drop a comment, always blunt and deliberate. Boys these days are too scared to get their hands dirty, so they think they're smart. When I got accepted into the business school at the University of Georgia, my mom, Sharon, hugged me and cried in the kitchen. She had always supported me, but never dared show it in front of my dad. The day I left, he handed me a $50 bill. No hug, no good luck. Just a sentence. "You're a Harper. Don't forget that." I didn't forget. I just didn't understand how they could tie that name to wood, sawdust, and mortar, but not to what I was trying to become, a builder of a different kind. I didn't spend my summers partying like others. I used my breaks to study coding, read about financial algorithms, and test out ideas for an investment analysis app I'd been dreaming about. My roommate called me the weirdo who loved Excel. I didn't care. I had a plan. And that plan didn't have room for cheap laughter from people who never believed in me. During winter of my sophomore year, I went home for Thanksgiving. The house was full of relatives. I was talking to my uncle about a startup idea I was working on when my father cut in, his voice loud like a hammer. "He's just messing around with some computer game, for fun. He's never actually made anything you can hold in your hands." I said nothing. I just grabbed another piece of turkey and smiled faintly. But in my mind, I recorded every word. I grew up next to the wooden bridges my father built, the houses he roofed, and the lessons he preached. Never trust anything you can't make with your own two hands. I didn't deny it. I knew he was right, in his world. But the world was changing, and I was entering a battle he'd never understand. My father believed I was a lost, weak, and aimless son. He once told my mom, thinking I was asleep, "If that kid fails, don't expect him to come crawling back for a job at my shop. I don't need a failed scholar dragging the Harper name through the mud." I didn't forget. I just remembered and moved forward. Quietly, firmly, and without looking back. Because someday I wouldn't need to say a word. He'd just have to look. And no, I can't build a house, but I can read the market like blueprints, and I know this. If you want to prove something, you shut up and build. No quitting halfway, no explaining to people who've already decided they'll never understand. In the spring of my junior year, I officially dropped out. Not because I failed, but because I found something worth chasing more than a diploma. An investment principle that could change how everyday people access the market. I called it Insight Loop. It wasn't flashy, just a simple algorithm that could analyze market psychology by tracking social media behavior patterns, macroeconomic data, and price movement in real time. I didn't build it for the guys in suits in New York. I wrote it for people like my mom, who saved pennies for 20 years just to afford a guilt-free summer vacation. I left school, moved into a crummy apartment on the outskirts of Savannah, and shared it with two old friends, Derek, a part-time coder, and Jalen, a graphic design student recently expelled. The kitchen was moldy, the floorboards creaked, but I had a desk, an old laptop, and an unshakable belief. Every day started at 6 a.m. with cold coffee and ended at 3 the next morning with scribbled code taped to the walls. I ate instant noodles, rice with salt, and sometimes popcorn, the kind supermarkets won't even shelve when it's on clearance. But I didn't complain. I was building something others couldn't see. I wrote nearly 40 emails to angel investors, venture capitalists, even local bank managers. No one replied. One person responded after 3 weeks, just to say, "Your algorithm sounds more like a social media hack than a real investment tool." I printed that email and taped it next to my bed. Once, I took a demo of Insight Loop to a startup fair in Atlanta. Rode a 5-hour bus just to stand in a corner with no booth, no banner, just a skinny guy in a wrinkled shirt holding a laptop. People walked past me like I was invisible. One older man scoffed when I explained real-time data modeling. He said, "People don't care why prices go up, they just want to know when to sell." I remember those words clearly, because when I got home, I rewrote the entire algorithm. I didn't want to tell people when to sell. I wanted to help them understand why. Every rejection was a puzzle piece I didn't have, and I'm grateful I got enough broken shards to figure out what I needed to build. Derek didn't fully understand what I was doing, but he believed in me enough to cook meals when I forgot, to sneak money into my domain fund when I was broke. Once, I asked him why. He just said, "You're the only guy I know who's living for something real, that's enough." Meanwhile, back home, my father kept sneering every time my mom mentioned me. Couldn't even finish school, what can he do? I've never seen anyone get rich just by typing all day. He'll come crawling back for a job like all those other dreamers. I don't blame him. To him, if something doesn't hurt your back or get your hands dirty, it isn't work. I just wanted, just once, for him to ask, "What are you working on?" That's all. But it never came. That summer, I got my first invitation from an investment firm in Austin after they stumbled across a blog I wrote on Medium about how AI could improve retirement investing. They didn't promise anything, just wanted to listen. I caught a night bus, packed a cheap suit borrowed from Jalen, and brought the presentation I wrote over 3 sleepless days. The meeting lasted exactly 12 minutes. The representative smiled politely and said, "We'll consider it. Either way, thank you for sharing." I walked out of the building with my mind in a blur, not disappointed, just hollow. They didn't reject me, but they didn't believe either, and that uncertainty made me feel like I was stuck between two worlds. One was my damp little apartment, the other was a dream I hadn't quite reached. When I got home, Derek handed me a package. Inside was a letter from TechVantage, an up-and-coming financial consulting firm in Denver. It read, "We tested Insight Loop with simulated data, and the results far exceeded expectations. If you're willing to fly to Colorado, we'd like to have a serious conversation." I stared at that line. My heart felt like it had caught fire, not loud but fierce. I knew, in that moment, something was about to change forever. I got the call at 9:17 on Monday morning while I was in the laundromat next to my apartment, waiting for the only suit I owned to finish drying. The caller was Alana Morse, Chief Strategy Officer at Sequoia West Partners, one of the top venture capital firms on the West Coast. Her voice was low and firm, straight to the point. "We reviewed the data you sent last week, along with the performance tests in 3 different markets." I held my breath. Insight Loop doesn't just work, it outpaces the market by 12 to 18 hours in 83% of cases. "You know what that means, don't you?" I didn't answer. My throat was dry. "We want to purchase exclusive rights to the technology for 5 years. $14 million. All in cash and equity." I hadn't misheard. I heard it right. $14 million. My body went still. For a moment, I forgot how to breathe. Alana continued, "If you agree, we'll fly someone out to Savannah this weekend. You can sign at our headquarters in San Francisco afterward or handle it through legal representation." I could only manage one word. Deal. After hanging up, I stood frozen in the laundromat, still holding a hanger, smiling like a lunatic. A girl, maybe 7 years old, walked by and pointed at me, saying to her mom, "That man looks like he just won the lottery." I burst out laughing. "You won the lottery? No, I just built one." I called my mom first. She cried over the phone, laughing through the tears. I knew it. I always knew you'd do something big, but I didn't think it'd be this soon. I didn't call my dad, not out of bitterness, but because I knew he wouldn't believe it until he saw it. 3 days later, I flew to San Francisco. Sequoia West's office was on the 42nd floor of a glass building overlooking the bay. The signing table was made of black stone. There was an abstract oil painting larger than my entire living room. Alana shook my hand and said, "David, you're not just selling technology, you're selling a future." When I signed the last line, I didn't feel like my life had changed. I felt strangely calm, like the world was finally seeing what I had seen since I was 16. That night, I stood alone on the hotel balcony, looking down at the glowing city lights. I thought about my father, about how he used to point at bricks and say, "Results don't just show up. They have to be laid down, one sweaty layer at a time." I sweat too, but at a keyboard, not next to a concrete mixer. When I got back to Savannah, I went straight to the Ferrari dealership. The salesman ignored me at first. Hoodie, worn-out shoes, hair a mess from a red-eye flight. But when I said, "I'm considering the Roma in graphite one-time payment," his attitude changed like I'd suddenly grown wings. I didn't choose that car to show off. I chose it because I needed a message that couldn't be twisted, a way to re-enter the world I came from without having to say a word. I didn't call ahead. I showed up on Independence Day when the whole extended family was gathered in my grandparents' backyard. My dad was running the barbecue as usual, surrounded by construction workers, neighbors, and old drinking buddies from the Carpentry Guild. I drove the Ferrari down the red dirt road like a blade cutting through a cornfield. When the engine roared, everyone turned. I saw familiar faces, shocked, skeptical, stunned. The car rolled to a stop right next to my dad's Chevrolet Silverado, the truck he once called a real man's badge of sweat. I stepped out with just my car keys, no luggage. Without a word, I walked straight into the backyard. The whole place went dead silent, like someone hit pause. My mom clutched her chest, eyes wide. My dad stood by the grill, holding the tongs, frozen stiff. "Sorry I'm late," I said, locking eyes with him. "Traffic from California was brutal." He forced a smile. "Well, look who it is. My boy David. Who'd you borrow that car from?" "Didn't borrow. It's mine." There were awkward chuckles. A murmur swept the yard. My dad laughed louder, patting me on the shoulder like I'd told a joke. "So what, you buying a helicopter next week?" I pulled the registration papers from my jacket and handed them to him. He glanced over them and his expression changed. No more forced smile, just heavy silence. He folded the paper and placed it on the table. "Must have a rich friend backing you." I didn't respond. I just smiled, my gaze unflinching. The whole cookout he avoided me. Every time I tried to explain the contract or my future plans, he changed the subject. To lumber prices, the weather, or workers quitting. When one of his buddies mentioned an article about me in a finance magazine, my father cut in, "Press, huh? Exaggeration is their business." I wasn't angry. I just looked at him for a long time. And I understood he wasn't denying my success because he didn't believe it. He was denying it because he was afraid. That night, after everyone had left, I poured a glass of water in the kitchen. Mom was doing dishes. She turned, drying her hands. "He's proud, he just doesn't know how to show it." I shook my head. "No, Mom, he's not proud, he feels threatened." Her eyes softened. She didn't argue. She knew I was right. I didn't expect a hug. I didn't hope for praise, but I had wished, just once, that he'd stop and listen. Instead, he chose silence, the kind that doesn't come from emotion, but from defense. As if my presence in that car were an attack on everything he had built his world around. After the party, I left at dusk. Mom walked me to the car, resting her hand gently on my shoulder. "Thank you for coming home, David." I only nodded. I didn't come back to be welcomed, I came back to be seen. The Ferrari rolled slowly down the red dirt road, leaving behind the house I once believed was home. But the truth is, it was never the place where I was understood. 2 days later, I got a text from Derek. Mr. Marshall stopped by, asked how you make money. He didn't look happy. Not long after that, my phone started blowing up. Calls from my aunt, Uncle Elliot, even an old neighbor. Is it true you're being sued? David, is that car real? Your dad said you just rented it to impress people. He claims the multi-million-dollar contract is just a stunt, that you're under investigation for investment fraud. I froze. I wasn't surprised. But it still hurt. Not because people doubted me, but because he, the man who once called me son, was the one planting those doubts. I called my mom. She answered in a quieter voice than usual. I've heard some things, but, David, maybe your father's just worried about you. I cut in. Worried? He's destroying my reputation, Mom. I paused, then asked, does he really believe I'm a fraud? On the other end, she didn't respond, just sighed, so heavily I could hear her soul in it. A week later, I met with Alana at Sequoia West's Denver headquarters to finalize the data transfer. During the meeting, she handed me a file. We got a call from someone claiming to be your father. He demanded to review the contract. I closed my eyes. I'm sorry, that wasn't supposed to happen. Don't worry, we didn't disclose anything, Alana said, lowering her voice. But David, you need to handle your family situation. Your name is now tied to our company. I knew she was right, but I also knew this wasn't just a family issue anymore. It was a battle between two worlds, one rooted in muscle and stubborn pride, and the other, the future, where I stood alone. That day, I drove back to Winston, not to my parents' house. I booked a small hotel room near downtown. Late at night, I stopped by the old grocery store to grab some coffee. The owner, Mr. Dean, recognized me immediately. Well, look who's back. David, huh? Heard you've gotten pretty famous. I smiled slightly. Guess word travels faster than I thought. He winked. Your dad says you're just putting on a show, but hey, people say stuff like that when they don't understand things. I turned away, heart tightening with every beat. I wasn't the 17-year-old kid begging my dad to look at my first design anymore. I was someone who signed million-dollar contracts. But why did rejection still feel the same? The next morning, I went straight to the woodshop, where he'd worked for 30 years. He was sitting in the small office, writing something in a ledger on his old wooden desk. I knocked softly. He looked up, his eyes scanning over me like I was a stranger. Dad, so, you're back. I need to talk. He didn't invite me to sit, but I pulled out a chair anyway. I know what you've been telling people. I just speak the truth. No, you speak what you want to believe. He set his pen down, voice hardening. I know that kind of success, David. Lasts a few years, then crashes. People like you live in fantasy. When the market slaps you in the face, you'll understand. I smirked. I don't need you to believe in me, but you don't have the right to smear me. He planted both hands on the desk, eyes locked in a challenge. If you're really strong, you let words roll off, and if you can't, it means you're only tough with your mouth. I stood, each word sharp. I didn't come back to argue. I came to tell you that if you keep sabotaging my name, I won't stay silent. And if you think I won't fight back, go ahead and try me. I turned and walked away, leaving him sitting in the heat of his own anger. That night, I got a message from Mom. He says he never wants to see you again. I read it over and over, no tears, no shaking. Just a deep clarity settling in. He didn't hate me. He feared me. Because I was living proof that his way might not be the only way anymore. A week after that tense confrontation at the workshop, I got a call from Uncle Ray, my dad's younger brother and co-founder of Harper Carpentry from back in the day. He asked to meet at the old bar in downtown, the place where local builders used to gather, now faded and half empty, just like the trade itself. Uncle Ray didn't waste time. Barely sat down before looking me dead in the eye. David, I need to tell you this before things spiral out of control. I nodded slowly. About Dad? He took a sip of beer and set the scratched-up glass on the wooden table. The company's been dying for the past 3 years. I leaned in slightly, keeping my voice calm. I figured as much, but how bad is it? He sighed, guilt flickering in his eyes. We mortgaged the house 2.5 years ago, used the money for CNC machines, new cutters, hired more crew. But customers didn't grow, actually started shifting to low-cost chains like Southern Build. I clenched my fists under the table. Never told me. Not Mom either. He hid everything? Ray nodded. He's been trying to act like it's fine, but the truth is, in 3 more months, he'll default. I even mortgaged my own truck to keep the shop open last time. I sat there, stunned. All those lectures about pride, about real labor, about honest work. Now just a mask covering a crumbling truth. I didn't resent him for failing. I was angry because he'd rather let the company collapse in silence than ask his son for help. Because of pride. Why are you telling me this? I asked, my voice low. Because yesterday he asked me whether you'd consider investing in Harper Carpentry, but he said it like he owes us, like this is your responsibility. I let out a laugh, but there was nothing joyful in it. And believe in me, but he still wants my money. Uncle Ray rubbed his forehead. David, your father comes from another generation. In his mind, if your way is right, then everything he's lived by is wrong, and he can't handle that idea. That night, I drove past the workshop. I didn't go in, just stood from a distance, watching the faint office lights still glowing. I saw my father's silhouette. He was sitting, hunched over a pile of paperwork, and for the first time, I didn't see a stubborn man. I saw someone drowning in his own past, struggling not to be forgotten. I thought about all the times he refused to listen to me, the times he changed the subject when I brought up technology, the future, transformation, not because he didn't understand, but because he understood too well, that admitting his son's success meant having to face his own failure. I realized the hatred didn't come from contempt, it came from fear. The next morning, I called Alana. I need you to find me a list of traditional construction and carpentry companies in the Southeast, especially in Georgia, that are undervalued but have a stable client base. What are you doing, David? I'm not trying to save my father. I'm trying to save a part of the history he built, just in a way he never could. By noon, I had a list of 3 potential businesses. I also called Jamie, a commercial real estate agent I'd worked with before, asking her to find a location suitable for opening a digital transition center for traditional businesses. I was redrawing the map not just for me, but for people like my father, those being left behind because they couldn't keep up with the tech race. Late that evening, I got a short text from Dad. Need to meet. It's about the company. Tomorrow night, 7 o'clock. I stared at that message for a while. No anger, no sadness. Just clarity. I typed a single word. Okay, but I knew I wasn't going. Because I had made my decision, I would not walk into that room as a son seeking forgiveness. I would return as someone who held the future in his hands, the one thing he never dared to face. I didn't go to that dinner, not to make a statement, but because I knew no words would ever convince a man like my father. He doesn't listen to reasoning, he only trusts what he can touch, contracts, numbers, cold hard truth on paper. So I would show him, not through words, but through action. The next morning, I drove to the office of Mason Redding, CEO of Greystone Build Group, a construction firm acquiring local companies with loyal client bases but lacking adaptability. I laid it out plainly. My father's company, Harper Carpentry, is collapsing, but it has something you want: a legacy customer network, local trust, and a skilled workforce. Mason leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. We approached him once. Mr. Harper refused every offer. Because he doesn't trust anyone but himself, but if I'm the one making the offer, it's different. I didn't need long to convince him. Greystone had been eyeing Harper Carpentry for a while, but always got ignored by my father. 3 hours later, I had the draft proposal in hand. $1.4 million, almost double the company's current valuation. Attached conditions: all current employees retained. My father, Marshall Harper, would remain as regional director for 5 years with profit-sharing rights. The shop would be renovated using my software platform, an integration of Insight Loop with traditional operations. I read it 3 times before signing off on the proposal as an authorized third-party representative. That afternoon, I met Uncle Ray at a small cafe. I handed him a copy of the contract. "I want you to give this to him." "You're not going to hand it over yourself?" he asked, frowning. I shook my head. "I will go, but not to ask permission." 3 days passed, no reply, no text, no call. On the 4th day, I drove myself to the company office. My father was in his office, looking exhausted, hands resting on a crumpled financial report. When I walked in, he looked up, not with rage, but like a man cornered. "What do you want now?" I stepped forward, placed the file on his desk. "I'm not asking. This is a buyout proposal from Greystone. Read it carefully." He picked it up, flipping through the pages. His eyes widened gradually. When he read the clause about retaining employees, his hand trembled slightly. When he saw the condition about keeping his own title, he went quiet. For a long time. "When did you do this?" "While you were telling the whole town I was a fraud?" He looked up. "I don't need your help. I'm not saving you. I'm saving something that you've been letting die out of pride." He tossed the papers back on the desk, voice tightening. "You think I'll bow down for your dirty money?" I picked the proposal back up and slid it back to him. "This money isn't for you to kneel. It's the only way the people who work for you don't lose their jobs. The only way Mom doesn't lose her home. The only way the Harper name doesn't go into bankruptcy records." The air in the room thickened. I knew he wasn't fighting me. He was fighting his own pride. I pulled something out of my coat pocket. The key to the Ferrari. Set it down on the desk, light as air. "This is for you. Not because I'm buying love, but because I know you'll never accept anything that doesn't come with a cost." "You think I want your car?" he snorted. "No, I think you need a reason to tell people you earned it, not begged for it." I turned, hand on the doorknob. "The proposal expires in 48 hours. If you refuse, they'll go to your competitors." I didn't look back, but I heard the soft clang of metal. He had picked up the key. The next evening, my mom texted me. "He drove this morning. Didn't say a word, but the car is no longer in the yard." I laughed quietly, not because of the car, but because he had finally acknowledged it in the only way he knew how. Through action. The following morning, Greystone called back. The deal had been accepted. The official contract would be signed by the weekend. My father would retain the position of regional director, and Harper Carpentry would become part of Greystone Holdings. I didn't attend the signing. I just stood outside, watching from a distance as he left the meeting room with a face heavy with emotion. But one thing was clear. He no longer bowed his head. 2 months after the deal with Greystone was finalized, I found myself in the moment I had imagined hundreds of times, but still never expected to arrive so soon. In front of me were more than 200 people, employees, investors, local business leaders, media representatives, and familiar faces from the town of Winston. My mom sat in the front row, her eyes shining with pride. Something I once thought existed only in dreams. And in the back of the hall, standing quietly among the crowd, was my father, Marshall Harper, shirt tucked in, hands in his pockets, eyes wary as if he were standing in a foreign land. I took a deep breath and stepped onto the stage. Behind me was the brand new company logo, Harper Insight Technologies. A name I chose to reflect both worlds I had once fought to reconcile. "Today," I began, my voice steady, "we officially launched the Harper Insight platform, a bridge between financial technology and the traditional industries being left behind by the digital age." Applause erupted. I kept my gaze calm and continued. "We are also announcing a strategic investment of $2.2 million in Greystone Regional Holdings, the current owner of Harper Carpentry and several other local businesses." A wave of murmurs rippled through the hall. I paused briefly, then spoke clearly. "I believe in the values my father, Marshall Harper, built over more than 3 decades. Values that can't be digitized, that can't be replaced. That's why, today, I am proud to introduce the person who will lead our traditional industries program at Harper Insight." I looked straight to the back of the hall. "Marshall Harper, The room paused for a beat. All eyes turned to him. My father stood frozen. Then, as if an invisible current had passed through, he stepped forward. Each step was not easy, not because of the crowd, but because he was entering a world he once viewed as the enemy. The applause grew louder. When he stood beside me on stage, I turned to him. "Welcome to the team, Dad." He didn't answer, but I saw something in his eyes I had never seen before. Recognition. The ceremony ended with handshakes, camera flashes, and congratulations. I avoided the press, walking slowly through the back hallway where my father stood alone, looking out at the rear courtyard of the building, the place where we laid the first brick of the Innovation Center. "What do you think?" I asked. He didn't look at me, just murmured, "This place doesn't feel like my workshop, but it still smells like wood." I chuckled. "Do you feel like you belong here?" He turned to me, tilted his head. "I'm not sure, but I do know one thing. If I don't step in, no one will remember the old ways." I nodded. "That's why I need you." In the following weeks, we worked together to build a program specifically for local traditional businesses: carpenters, electricians, welders, family-owned repair shops. My father didn't like computers. He hated Excel, but he understood how tradespeople think. And when he spoke to them in a language they understood, through calloused hands, real experience, and genuine failure, they listened. One time, he returned to the office, face drenched in sweat, and said, "I can't believe I just taught a 60-year-old welder how to use an ordering app." Then he laughed. For the first time, I saw him laugh because he felt useful in a world he once resented. I didn't interfere. I let him do things his way. That was part of our unspoken deal. I brought him into this world, but he wouldn't become someone else. He would change it, using what he already had. One fall afternoon, as we prepared to finalize partnerships with 3 major craft associations in the region, my father came into my office. He sat down, looked around, then said, "You know, David, when I was young, I thought success meant building a house with your own hands, every brick, every nail. But now I get it. You're building too, just with something different." I stayed quiet, letting him speak. "I'm not apologizing for not understanding you sooner. I just hope it's not too late to build with you." I said nothing. I just reached out and shook his hand, a rough, steel-hammed hand now clasped in his son's, not in conflict, but in partnership. A week later, we hung a new quote on the main wall of Harper Insight. It came from something he jokingly said after a meeting. "Remember the one who once stood there holding your first wooden ruler?" I read it 3 times. Then I ordered it carved into wood and mounted at the entrance. We still weren't the same. Maybe we never would be. But at least now, we were looking in the same direction. 6 months after Harper Insight officially launched, I sat in my 3rd-floor office, watching the busy traffic flow through the newly revitalized Winston Industrial District. On my desk was a photo frame, my father and me standing together at the first conference for traditional businesses in the South. I remembered that moment clearly. He still wore his white button-up shirt, still the same old leather shoes. But the look in his eyes had changed. No longer cautious like the day I returned in the Ferrari. Now there was calm, and ease only found in those who no longer feel the need to fight. In the end, we didn't become father and son who hugged and cried out of newfound understanding. We didn't need to. We collaborated, not through emotion, but through action. Every Monday morning, my father still arrived at the office at 7:30 a.m., carrying a plastic coffee cup from the old shop near the wood shop. He didn't use the computer much, but small business owners flocked to him because of how he explained technology in their language. "If this software saves you 3 hours of bookkeeping a week, that's 3 hours you can eat dinner with your kid." People listened to him, believed him, because he had once been them. I sold the Ferrari last month. Didn't tell anyone. Didn't feel a thing. It had done what it needed to do. Opened a door I was once locked out of. But now, I no longer had anything to prove. I drove a regular black car, no flashy emblem. Parked next to my father's new pickup, the one he bought after reinvesting in company shares. No one looking at the Harper Insight parking lot would guess there had once been a broken father-son bond there. but it existed. And now it was healing. Step by step, meeting by meeting, each quiet lunch we shared. No need for many words, just presence. One Friday afternoon, my father walked into my office holding a local newspaper. "This article's not bad. They called you the financial mind connecting generations of craftsmen." I don't get all those words, but I think it's a compliment. I smiled, taking the paper. "Since when do you read the news?" He shrugged and cleared his throat. "I'm not as dumb as you think." We both laughed, not out of sarcasm, but because finally we were on the same side. At the year-end ceremony, I let my father deliver the opening speech. No notice, no suggestion. I simply handed him the microphone in front of 200 people. He stepped up, adjusted his collar, then looked across the room. I used to think kids who played with computers didn't understand the real value of work. I used to think, if you didn't see sweat dripping, didn't hear the hammer strike, then it wasn't labor. He paused, his eyes landing on me. I was wrong, because there are things you don't build with your hands that still stand as strong as any bridge. My son proved that. And I'm proud, even if it took a few blows to my pride to admit it. The room erupted in applause. I didn't say anything, just stood and shook his hand, for the first time in public. He gave a light squeeze, didn't look at me, but the corner of his mouth lifted slightly. A small gesture, but I knew we had touched the very place that once tore us apart. We never went back to being close like when I was a kid, when he'd take me to buy lumber, teach me how to tell good nails from bad. But the distance had been replaced by a new kind of respect, one I never imagined would exist between us. One late evening, my mom called. "He told the neighbors you just signed a new contract with the state of Florida. He looks so proud." I leaned back in my chair, smiling in the dim light of the office. "For the first time, Mom, I don't feel like I have anything left to prove." We launched a new program called Bridgecraft, a bridge between the craftsman generation and the tech-savvy college grads. My father led the advisory team. I only showed up at the end to approve budgets and oversee communications. A freshman once asked me during orientation, "Is the company called Harper Insight?" I replied, "Because some values don't live in data, they live in the person who teaches you how to live before you learn how to make money." He nodded thoughtfully. I turned away, but inside that answer wasn't just for him. It was for the younger me. The day Harper Insight expanded into its third state, my father and I stood on a hill overlooking the new industrial zone. He pointed into the distance and said, "When I was your age, all I dreamed of was having one woodshop and 8 workers. But you've got an entire system." I smiled, but I wouldn't have any of it if you hadn't taught me how to hammer my first nail. He didn't respond, just gave me a gentle pat on the shoulder, the same kind of pat I used to think was stiff and cold, but now felt warmer than 100 compliments. Down the hill, dozens of trucks bearing the Harper Insight logo lined up, their red taillights twinkling in the sunset. I realized then that the luxury car from years ago had only been the beginning, a symbol at the start of a much deeper journey. The journey of reclaiming myself through the harmony of old and new, between me and him, between what I once ran from and what I had learned to appreciate. And for the first time in my life, I didn't need to win, because finally we were building together. David Harper's story is not just about overcoming judgment and family expectations. It's proof of the power of perseverance, self-belief, and bridging two seemingly incompatible worlds, tradition and innovation. From a son once dismissed for not doing real work, David became the one who led the way, rescuing his father's company and redefining the meaning of success. Sometimes reconciliation doesn't come from an apology, but from building a future together. What do you think about David's journey and his father's transformation? Have you ever faced a similar generational conflict? Share your thoughts below and don't forget to follow the channel to discover more inspiring stories about family and forgiveness.